Good day, students. My name is Mrs. Ross and I'm the module coordinator for Grade R Teaching 101. And due to the coronavirus outbreak, unfortunately, as you know, lectures have been suspended for the time being. We will have to be doing recordings over ECI so that you are able to access the information. So please note that I will be discussing some things, but obviously you will have to do some research yourself. We will also be uploading the distance learning study guide for you so that you have access to additional study material. So the units that we're going to be covering here is units 4 and 5, which is emergent literacy, listening, speaking, and reading. So as you know, we have two different types of communication. There is verbal and non-verbal communication. Verbal, obviously, the words that come out of your mouth, and non-verbal would be facial expressions, body language, and so on. Okay, so look at this picture. How many ways can you see that the children are communicating with each other? We can see that the children are holding hands, which is a sign of friendship. They are laughing, and they look happy. All of these are non-verbal communication techniques. All right. So as it says below, as much as 85% of our communication is non-verbal. What is meant by the term emergent literacy? So if something is emerging, it is developing. It's not there already. Okay, so the Literacy Development Council of Newfoundland and Labrador defines the term in the following way. Literacy not only involves competency in reading and writing, but goes beyond this to include the critical and effective use of these in people's lives, and the use of language, oral and written, for all purposes. So this definition involves critical thinking about what a person reads, as well as expanding the term to include oral forms of literacy. Literacy is being able to read. I would like you to take some time to think about the various skills that we need in order to acquire language, and just come up with 2 skills. This picture here should help you. So yes, we need listening skills as well as speaking. So some ideas for listening activities that you can do with your class. These would be poems and rhymes that play with language. For example, words that are rhyming or have alliteration in them. For example, there is a mustard in my custard. So mustard and custard would be the rhyming words. You could make up guessing games. You would say something to the effect of, I'm thinking of an animal, it can gallop, you can ride it, what is it? Obviously the answer would be a horse. You could write out some words and read them out to the children. These would be rhyming words, and the children would need to identify which of those words is the odd one out or doesn't belong. So it would be something to the effect of rat, bat, and cat, and dog. Clearly, dog does not rhyme with the other words. You would go through it a few times with the children, and hopefully they would identify that dog is the incorrect one. You could also play the game Simple Simon Says. For those of you who don't know this game, it is an action game where the teacher or the child who's leading the game would say, Simple Simon Says, put your hands on your head. And everyone would have to put their hands on their head. Then they would say, Simple Simon Says, stamp your feet. And everyone would need to stamp their feet. However, if the person said, jump up and down, without beginning the instruction with Simple Simon Says, and a child does that instruction and does jump up and down, then that child would be out because the leader of the game did not say Simple Simon Says. Then you could play a yes-no game. This is where a child would come up with an idea of an animal or a person or some object, and the rest of the class would have to ask questions about things. So, are you a boy? And the child who's leading the game will say no or yes, and so on. You could make up some silly rhyming jokes or some limericks, and then you could also play games like I Spy. I Spy is quite a nice game because it also assists the child in developing visual skills, such as being able to observe things more carefully. So you could say, I spy with my little eyes something beginning with ba. Now you would say ba as opposed to b because you are dealing with younger children and they're learning the phonics. So the letter name would be b, but the letter sound is ba. So perhaps you have a board in your classroom and you've chosen that, that's why it's the letter ba, and the children will have to look for everything in the classroom that possibly begins with a ba. And eventually someone should find out that the ba that you are looking for is board, and then they will have a turn to do the spying of whatever object. Then some speaking activities. You could verbalize the learner's actions. So if they're doing a particular task, you can say, oh, I like the way you did that dance, you were jumping up and down, you were twirling around, and so on. Okay, you can use new vocabulary. This is especially important when you're reading books to the children. If there's a particular word that you think might be a little bit difficult for them to understand, don't change the word or leave that word out. It's important that children develop their vocabulary, and by reading a story which has got a few words that are a little bit different to their usual words is actually good because they learn new words but within a context that they can understand. Okay? Then there are real life experiences, and you can talk about them afterwards through encouraging spontaneous conversations during free and outdoor play sessions. Often if you walk around during outdoor play, you'll hear the children chatting about something that happened on the weekend, or if you go into the fantasy play area, children will reenact something that happened. And you can, if they're not talking to one another, you can encourage this. Otherwise, you could also have the children discussing what they did on the weekend, because that's also encouraging confidence as well. Okay, so you could accept the learner's language and their pronunciation of words, bearing in mind that in South Africa we have many children who do not speak English as their mother tongue, so they may mispronounce a word. Don't embarrass the child by saying, oh my gosh, really, that is so incorrect. Rather just say, so if the child says gook instead of book, say, yes, that's a very interesting book. All right, don't mock the child for saying gook, and also don't reinforce the word gook instead of book. So keep referring to it as book, okay? Dramatization of stories and rhymes. Children love drama and acting, so read them a little story and they can act it out. So perhaps if you read the book Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you can have the children acting out the story afterwards. Okay? You could also have puppets available so the children can use the puppets themselves, or you could do a puppet show. And obviously the fantasy play area is also vitally important to hear the children developing their speaking. So the whole language approach, this can be found on page 149 of your Davin textbook. Okay, this is how the child learns language, and it should be the starting point of teaching language. In order for children to develop language, they need to hear and use it. So the emphasis on the whole language approach is exposure in a natural and informal way. You don't have a language lesson in grade R. Everything is incidental and it happens naturally. Okay? All the language skills must be included, and this is listening, speaking, reading, spelling, and writing, and they are all interlinked. You could use the same activities to develop these language skills. So they could listen to a story that you have read, then they could speak about the story. So they will tell you what happened in the story. Then they could be doing reading of themselves. So they will have the book in front of them and they will retell the story. Obviously, they can't read all the words. Some of them may be able to read some of the words, but they can retell the story in their own words by looking at the pictures. Okay. Then integration between language and other aspects of the daily program should also take place. So when you are doing your greeting in the morning, you are speaking, so that is integrating language. Children could go and do the little weather forecast or the weather report, go look outside. Oh, ma'am, it's sunny today. it's windy. So they are using adjectives when they're discussing what the weather is. There's lots of different ways that you can include language development with the other aspects of the daily program. So the implications for you as the teacher, this is the beginning of reading, writing, spelling, and the learner's overall language development, and it cannot be separated in the grade R or reception year. So you need to have an inclusive and integrated language development program. There are no formal language periods in grade R, as I said, so we need to encourage spontaneous language. The more words and sentences we use, the more speech is creative. Social interaction is important, and this doesn't happen in formal language periods. You need to engage with your children in your class. If you just leave them to sit and do nothing all day but color in, they're not going to be learning anything. Their language won't be developed because they're not engaged in conversation. With regards to the use of workbooks and worksheets, these are usually discouraged because they are not developmentally appropriate. Many of the schools that you will go to for your teaching practice, however, unfortunately, do use a lot of worksheets. There is a place for worksheets, especially when it comes to children practicing their writing. They've got to be able to follow the dotted lines or to trace, but this should not be the only way in which teaching takes place, teaching and learning. So grade R learners learn best through hands-on activities. They need concrete objects or concrete manipulatives. And the use of workbooks also prevents the development of a child's own initiative. So rather than coloring in a flower, get the child to draw and decorate their own flower. So what you've got in front of you is called the literacy tree. And you can see it's quite a detailed picture. We are going to discuss it in further detail, little bits by bit. But you can see the branches, the trunk of the tree says language, okay? And then the branches are recognizing words, written communication, and meaningful reading. The roots of the tree state access to books, oral language, reading at home, and motivation. The soil in which the literacy tree grows is dependent on the quality of teaching as well as the teacher's professional development. Now, on the leaves of the tree, they are all connected to what is written on the bark. Okay? So under written communication is handwriting, spelling, and meaningful writing. Then under recognizing words, it is phonics, phonological awareness, different word reading strategies, and sight words. And then under meaningful reading, it is vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. So you will also see that at the top of the picture, there is the sun, because the sun helps the tree to grow, as well as a rain cloud with raindrops, which also helps the tree to grow. So the sun says rich reading experiences, and the cloud says assessment for teaching and learning. So with regards to the assessment, it is assessment plans, assessment of learning, and the response to instruction. Okay, so we're going to look at it in a bit more detail. The link to this is on the left-hand side of your slide. All right, so as I said, I've now zoomed in on different parts of the tree so you can identify better what the picture is telling you. All right, so as I said, the trunk has language, the roots say access to books, oral language, reading at home, and motivation, and the branches state recognizing words, written communication, and meaningful reading. So, with regards to language development, you could read books that do not have pictures. So if you look underneath all this writing, there's a gingerbread man. So the children will look at the picture and will say, there's a gingerbread man and a cow. And then there's a fox and a gingerbread man. And then there's ingredients for baking and a rolling pin. And then there's also the fox that's looking happy and he's got a big tummy. So the children can associate words with pictures, okay? And they can have discussions with you. So recipes are a very good idea because you are speaking, there are instructions in there, and you can actually do a recipe demonstration in class. It can be part of their Baker Day or something like that, and then you can give them each a copy of the recipe and they will work from there. Okay, so books that do not have pictures are good for discussions. Then they can associate words with pictures, and as I said, recipes are a very good idea. And there's a picture of a pancake recipe. All right, so on the literacy tree, under written communication, we have handwriting, spelling, and meaningful writing. Then, under recognizing words, we have phonological awareness, phonics, sight words, and word reading strategies. And lastly, we have got meaningful reading, which is vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. So what is phonological awareness? Phonological awareness means to focus on the sounds of speech, the rhythm, and the individual sounds. Phonemic awareness is part of phonological awareness, and it is the ability to hear individual sounds within words. So with regards to phonological awareness, the book The Cat in the Hat is very good because there's a lot of rhyming words and you can get into a rhythm. Okay? Whereas phonemic awareness is spelling the word cat, k-a-t. Now in this picture you can see we've got little flashcards with the different letters. So the children have made up the word cat with the k, a, and t. Then underneath the k, they've also put pictures of other words beginning with the curly k. So you can see there is a clown and a carrot. Under the a, they have put an apple and an ant. And under the t, there is a turtle and a tortoise. I mean, a turtle or a tortoise and a teddy bear. So in this slide, we're going to discuss what the sun was dealing with. Unfortunately, the person who created this image put the writing in yellow on an orange background, so it is quite difficult to read. So I will read through it for you. But just remember, just like plants are reliant on the sun to help them grow, so are children reliant on rich reading experiences in order to develop their language. So the first ray of the sun says interactive reading aloud. So read to children aloud, and when children are able to read, encourage them to read aloud. It's very, very important that children, when they're learning to read, read aloud so that you as the teacher, and if you've got your own children, as the parent, can ascertain whether the child can actually read those words. You know yourself when you were younger, if you came across the word that you couldn't read, you would just skip past it and carry on. Now, that's not what we want for our children. We want them to be able to read accurately. If they battle to pronounce the word, that's absolutely fine, and you will then work through the word with them. Okay. Shared reading is when children sit together and read together. They share the reading experience. So it's when you have your class readers and the children will read that way. Then guided reading is when you as a teacher sit with a book on your lap and you point to the different words as you are reading them in the book. Then there is reading at just the right level. You're not going to go and read your grade R children a very difficult book about, like Lord of the Rings. Okay, Lord of the Rings is a lovely book, but it is very, very difficult, and most adults battle to read it as well. So you will read children age-appropriate books. So things like The Magic Faraway Tree. Then something like The Naughtiest Girl at School. These are all Enid Blyton books. But also there are obviously Julia Donaldson books, which are fantastic books. She wrote The Gruffalo. And there's also Jill Eggleton books. Those are very good books because they've got a lot of rhyming in them and a lot of repetition. So these are ideal because then the children can actually start saying the same, will say the words to you when you get to that section of the page. Okay? And then there's independent reading, which is what the children will do when they are competent enough. So telling stories versus reading stories. What is the difference between telling a story and reading a story? So telling a story is an oral thing. Stories that your granny would tell you when you went to visit her, and you'd sit on the floor and say, "Granny, please tell me a story." And she'll tell you a story about when she was young, or long, long, long ago, there was so-and-so. Okay? That is the oral tradition. Okay? And nowadays, we can combine the oral tradition as well as the digital age and make some really wonderful stories. Okay? Now, with reading stories, that is you holding a book and you are reading it to the children in your class. They are looking at pictures. When you tell a story, there aren't any pictures there, and it's very good at developing the child's imagination. So, according to Miller, engaging in storytelling activities is a way to motivate even the most reluctant reader or writer. Think about this. Do you agree with the statement? And now, explain why. Obviously, you can't tell me this because we're not doing a face-to-face lecture, but it's important that you do think about these different questions.
Welcome to pre-K.
But on the way to the meadow, there is a bridge across the river. And who lives under the bridge?
A troll.
The troll. The mean old troll. And the troll said,
Who's crossing my bridge?
roared the troll, I'm coming to gobble you up. Oh, and the billy goat said, oh, don't eat me. Oh, no, wait for my brother, because he's
Big.
big. He is bigger. Who's crossing over my bridge? Said the troll. And the second billy goat said, oh, it's just me, the second billy goat. I'm going to the meadow to make myself fat. Trip, trap, trip, trap, trip, trap. Okay, now he's across the bridge. And the third billy goat was so heavy that the bridge creaked and moaned. The troll said, what did he tell him? I'm coming to gobble you up. He has to get out by himself.
And then can you get in here?
Oh, he's going to climb up and come up here? I don't think he's going to bother the goats. He's busy in the water trying to swim. So snip, snap, snout, the tails towed out. What lucky goats they were. Weren't they lucky?
Yes.
Yes, I love the three billy goats gruff.
I don't like the troll.
You don't like the troll? Thanks for coming.
All right, so what did you think about the way the teacher read that story? Do you think it was good enough? Do you think that she used expression? Personally, I think she did it very well, and you can see how she engaged with the children in her class. She wasn't just reading from the book, she was showing the children the pictures, and this is what you'll have to do when you do your ITP 100, when you have to now go and actually do storytelling to your ITP group, as well as to the children in your teaching practice school. All right. So reading is not formally taught in grade R in South Africa. What we do have is interactive reading, shared reading, and guided reading. So the interactive reading is a whole class activity. You can use a large or a smaller book. It happens on a daily basis, and it encompasses all beginning skills necessary to accumulate language. And the children can take a picture walk through the book. They can have a look at all the pictures and then come up with an idea of what the story is about. Then shared reading is a large book, and it is a whole class activity. Children will join in where necessary to join the teacher, just like when the teacher was reading the Three Billy Goats graph. The children knew what to say at certain points. So when the billy goats were crossing the bridge, they knew that they said trip, trap, trip, trap. and that the troll would jump out and say, "Who goes there?" All right. Then it also has enlarged text so that the children can actually see the words if they're sitting near the back of the group. The teacher will point to the words as well, and the children can act as though they are reading. Then with guided reading, it's small groups, normally in grade 1, and the teacher guides children using skills such as decoding. So we're now going to discuss assessing of teaching and learning. The raindrops say assessment plans, response to instruction, and assessment of learning. Now this also is dependent on the quality of teaching as well as the teacher's professional development. So the role of a teacher in literacy. You need to be a good role model, not as in behavior-wise, that's also very important, but that's not going to affect their literacy. When you speak correctly, all right? Pronounce the words clearly. Have the correct grammar. If you are speaking in a language, you want the children to be able to speak it correctly. Use good, intelligible language in the classroom. Talk at the level for the grade R learners. Pronounce your words correctly. Demonstrate correct sentence construction. And language use should match the linguistic ability of the learners. Please refrain from saying things like, "Y'all must do this." Y'all is not a word. You is a singular and a plural word. So instead of saying y'all, which is for you all, you would just say you, because you are speaking to the group of the class. Don't use other slang words because it's just not appropriate, and we're supposed to be teaching our children to speak English correctly. So have a look at this classroom. Now, we need to, when we're developing language, have a stimulating and language-rich environment. How would you create this environment? Have a look at what's around the classroom. Do you see that there is a storyboard next to the teacher's chair? So what she would do there, it's like a felt board, and she would stick pictures on there as she's telling the story, and the little characters could move around. So that would be for storytelling. If you have a look at the mat that the children will sit on, there are letters all over the mat, as well as there are numbers. So children can identify the letters. Then there is a fantasy play area. You can see there's a little, what looks like a shopping till. There's a kitchen with a fridge and a stove, and the words imagine above it. Additionally, behind the teacher's chair is a little circle there with the seasons, and then you can see an alphabet frieze on the wall. So there are capital letters and lowercase letters written in the correct font for that age group. In this instance, it is ball and stick. Again, something that you will learn to do in your ITP 100 lectures. And there's also a number chart from 1 to 30 behind the teacher as well. There are posters everywhere, so it is a very language-rich environment. Now I would like you to take some time to think about the factors that you think would influence language development and draw on your own personal circumstances and experiences. So these articles here, you can read them if you have the opportunity. We would appreciate it if you do, just to give you some idea of teaching a second language, or what's known now as a first additional language. How would you go about teaching a second language? Okay. Now, many children that you teach will not be English-speaking children, or you might be teaching at an Afrikaans school and you've got English children coming in. So the medium of instruction will be Afrikaans, and they may not speak Afrikaans fluently. So as I said, many children will come into contact with you who are not mother tongue speakers of the school's medium of instruction, and you need to know how to deal with that. Okay, so What you could do is you would have your lesson plan, okay, with introduction, content or development, and the conclusion. So your introduction to any language lesson should always be a song or a poem. It captures the children's attention and it makes the lesson a lot more exciting. So you could sing a song, you could tell a story, or you could recite a rhyme. If you are telling a story, make sure it's a short story, because remember, you still need to develop your lesson as well. So perhaps you're going to do a story about fish. So you could sing the little rhyme 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I let him go again. Why did you let him go? Because he bit my finger so. Which finger did he bite? This little finger on my right. Many of the children in your class will already know this little rhyme. So it is quite helpful to do this because some of them can teach the others. All right. So the content would then be you now reading the children the story, okay, about the fish. And if there are actions, you can get the children to do the actions, okay. You could also do a song or a rhyme. And then your conclusion could be a drawing pertaining to the story, the poem, the song, whatever you've just done with them. They could do a drawing or a painting.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 little speckled frogs sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One jumped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are 4 green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 little speckled frogs sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One jumped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are 3 green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. 1, 2, 3. 3 little speckled frogs sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One jumped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are 2 green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. 1, 2. 2 little speckled frogs sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One jumped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there is 1 green speckled frog. Glub, glub. 1. 1 little speckled frog sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. He jumped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are no green speckled frogs. Glub, glub.
Square.
I'm sure you were singing along to that song just like I was, and you can see how well it would work in a classroom. So the children needn't watch the video. You could just teach them the song. You could make it more interactive. You could have a sheet and you could throw some of those little rubber frogs onto the sheet and you could bounce them up and down. And as one frog jumps off, you could take one frog away and they could keep bouncing. And that you can then see as an integration with maths. Okay, so explain how you would set up a lesson on autumn using the video clip, incorporating the whole language approach. So here you could explain about the leaves falling off the tree, the colors of the leaves.
Braver than our beings. Longer when we gleam. Dee-da-dee-dum. Dee-da-dee-dee. Hello, Christopher Robin. I can't seem to remember the... It's autumn. It is. It's the first day of autumn. A time of hot chocolatey mornings and toasty marshmallow evenings. And best of all, leaping into leaves. Oh.
All right, so think about ways in which you could now go and teach about autumn using the whole language approach. You could have pictures of what trees look like in autumn, but bearing in mind that in South Africa we don't have too much of leaves falling off the trees and making huge piles as you go along the road as you would in Europe and in the States, but we do still have leaves falling off the trees. So you could speak about how crunchy the leaves are, and perhaps you could collect some leaves and you could let the children scrunch them in their hands so they could feel how brittle they are as opposed to fresh leaves from summer and spring. You could then explain that the weather starts to get a little bit cooler. They can describe the weather, what types of clothes they would wear. So they're doing all these various descriptive activities. And then you could read stories, you could have a display table and discuss what's on the display table and so on. All right, so listening, you could read a story about It's the First Day of Autumn by it's a Winnie the Pooh story. Then you could speak about what you notice about the weather, as I've said, and you can discuss autumn, talk about the different seasons. And then you could read and provide labeled pictures to extend vocabulary. How would you integrate these ideas into your daily program? So how could you integrate autumn, as we've said, with the whole language approach, into your daily program? So you've got your structured activities, which are your teacher-guided ones, which is rings, discussion groups, and small groups. So there you could use your display table, where the children can come and have a look at what's on the table, or your science and discovery table, whatever you have in your classroom, and you could discuss it with them. You could teach them about the seasons. All right? Then their daily routines, their daily routine activities, remember, are toilet, greeting, weather, packing up, and snack time. An ideal way you could integrate this is through the weather discussions. How is the weather changing? How was it yesterday? What is it like today? Has the weather changed? And then with your free play activities, these are your indoor and outdoor activities. This could be Lego building, fantasy play, sensopathic trays, and jungle gyms. A wonderful one for autumn would be a sensopathic tray filled with autumn leaves. So you will have these brown leaves in a trough or a tray, and you can hide things inside there. And the children can dig inside and feel the crunchiness of the leaves on their fingers. All right. I do hope that this has been of some assistance to you. Please read through your study material, your Davin textbook and your DeWitt textbook just for some more guidance, as well as the study guide that has been uploaded for you that belongs to the distance learning module, but it will be of benefit to you as well.